Hey everybody, really excited to speak with Michael today, who is just about to start at ZoomInfo. Michael, a lot will break down, but maybe starting at the beginning, where were you at? What got you looking at tech sales? And we'll start to peel it back from there.
I come from a background from 2015, 2013 or so. I owned two personal training studios in the New York City area, and then the second one that I owned that led to a much larger group fitness project, and I ran a group fitness studio in the area for that was 6 years, and we did some really great work. It taught me a lot about running a business from the ground up. You do everything on the planet, but I noticed that the things that I really stuck to and liked were the sales and marketing aspect of it. I liked my ability to use words to get people in the door. I liked my ability to write copy that resonated with people so that even though I'm speaking to an entire population, someone would feel like I'm only talking to you. Um, and I've always been in love with language, and I majored in speech communication in college. Um, and I've had that love because I thought that's what makes business. That is business. Um, and so I ran the fitness studio. We did some really great work there. We got to the point where we were contacted by the Real Housewives of New Jersey. They kept hearing about our studio, and they wanted some of their cast members to come in, and pretty much they wanted us to kill them on camera. And at that point, I was like, oh, we made it. We did it. And the shoot was scheduled for the same week that the president said, we're going to shelter in place for 2 weeks and then we'll be right back to business. So then we rescheduled it for after the 2 weeks. And then, as you know, 2 weeks turned into 2 years and forget about it. But up to that point, we built a really solid core following. A lot of people told us this is our second home. This is my other place. So we had that going for us. And with COVID around, we just reverted back to personal training, which was our roots, which worked well in that situation. And eventually afterwards, the New York City landscape for fitness had just really changed. It wasn't like it was. It was just there was so much energy in the space, and it was just fitness everywhere, but it had changed. And so I decided to close the business. And at that point, I didn't know what I wanted to do specifically, but I knew I wanted to go into some sort of sales role. I just didn't know what, because again, being an entrepreneur for that long, I'm used to doing everything. And the luxury of just having to do one job, it was like, okay, I do that, but then like, what else do I do? So then a lot of our studio members, they're managing directors of this and, VP of that in the New York City area. So I just leaned on them. What do you think about this? And asked them their opinion. And a few people said, oh, you should be in sales. I've seen you. You should totally be in sales. You're good. I'm like, okay. And so I started researching it. And then another member, he was a field sales rep for Microsoft, and he gave me some literature to check out. And then another member of my studio, she's in field sales for Google Cloud. And she just came to me unsolicited one day, and she was like, I know you're looking for other things to do. She was like, you'd be really good in sales. So I was like, all right, and that's the second person. So I just started looking and looking. And at that point, that's when I think I signed up for your program. And I had looked at other programs, and, there's quite a few of them in the space now, but I'm a person that I tend to always look for the 5%. I know it's a little bit off from the Pareto principle, but I tend to look for that 20%. Where's the 20%? So whatever the 80% is doing, get me away from that. And I saw that the 80% were going into other programs. And I said, if that many people are going there, let me avoid that one. So then I kept searching, found you guys, and I was like, oh, I found I found the 20%. So then I joined, and then from there, I went through the program. I applied a little bit, but then an opportunity presented itself, and I went to go work for an electric company. And that was my most recent role. I was in government affairs, and government affairs is the way I read the job description. Pretty much to me, it sounds like you're an account executive for government officials. That's how I processed it. They don't see it that way at all, but ultimately that's what you're doing. Let's not kid anybody. And so that's all I did was just establish relationships with government officials and maintain those relationships. And that's what I did. But I ran into an issue of one, logistics. I had to change some things logistically with family and everything. Um, but when that popped up, I said, oh, let me start looking at the tech world again. And so then I started really going after it. I redid your program, went through it again, and then I broke out the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is gold, and that really helped me. And then from there, a few opportunities came about. And if I could tell you, I was looking at account executive positions because I was torn between account executive because I've done that. I've done it in a B2C capacity, but the C in that was all to the C-suiters. And so that's why I was used to selling to. But there was this component of that SDR, that prospecting, that hunting that I just didn't have. And for me, that is a serious downgrade in pay, but that's in the immediate. I'm more of a long-term strategic thinker. And so I said I had to humble myself and say, okay, let me learn this aspect of it. And then with that, I'll have a much greater career because I know I'm comfortable with this further down the line part. Let me get this beginning part. And then the ZoomInfo position came about, and I had conversations with you, Eric, about it. You know, what are your thoughts? And, you know, I asked some people, and the feeling was, but I know for a fact I like the software, and other softwares like it, and other people in the industry that are in places where I want to be, those account executives, they use the software. So there's something to that for me. And then I was on a discovery call one day, and some guy from big name software company, he was trying to sell my company something. And I'm just sitting there looking like, okay, go ahead, do your spiel. And then I noticed a Z Chrome tab. And I said, oh, is that ZoomInfo? And he just came on. He was like, oh, yeah, you know it? It's like one of the tools I cannot live without. And it was that moment I was like, okay, I made the right choice. Yeah. And everyone I've spoken to from there has been nothing but gracious, great people, very friendly, very welcoming. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's pretty similar to my own journey. And I just remember like having to kind of like suck up my ego a little bit. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go in and be an AE. And I was literally talking to Eric about this too, back when I was going through the process. I think it does take a lot. And I think that's where a lot of people just fall apart. Like they weed themselves out, unfortunately, where like there's people that are absolute killers that could do it very, very well. And it's just, we're only talking 12 to 18 months. And I'm so happy that I did it. I started out as an SDR because it really does set you up. And it's just kind of like one of those unlocks. Like if you go and be an AE at a subpar company, then even if you get like a high OT, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to hit it. So I remember talking to you like pretty early on as well. And I'm pretty proud of you for just making that decision. I think you're going to absolutely crush it.
Thank you.
I want to take a step back just to when you were looking at a ton of different courses and different things. Obviously, we appreciate you saying that we're kind of like the 20% and so forth. What was it specifically about higher levels that made you say, hey, this seems like the right fit in like a sea of different spots? Obviously, like, you know, we don't have the volume or anything else that maybe other programs do, but was there anything else that made you say, hey, this is it?
Good question. Initially, I would say the language that you guys used. I mentioned before, I'm big into speech and just language. And I noticed a difference in the language that you use on your website and your videos, how you speak. And I noticed how they speak and their language on their website. It was like very woo-woo, fluff, hypey versus very tactical, specific industry spoken words. And so that to me was the first difference. after that, I noticed that I looked up a few people that were put out there as testimonials. And I'm not so much in this role specifically. I know this is a top of funnel type of thing. I'm not so much interested in who got in. I'm interested in who's still there. And so I looked up some people that were, put out there as testimonials, and 4 months later, they're not there anymore. 6 months later, they're not there anymore. And I'm like, okay, all right, something's off here. So then I did the same thing with you guys, and oh, this person was here. Oh, now they got promoted to here, and I see this trajectory. So that for me is like, okay, 20%.
Nice. I love that. I love that. And I like the way that you went about the process too. Maybe now that you've been through the process, you've been through the program, was there a specific part of the program that you felt like, hey, this was super, super valuable, or this kind of changed the game or changed my outlook, or maybe one part of the course that was more valuable than the rest, perhaps?
One part of the course that was more valuable was the spreadsheet and everything around the spreadsheet. So the tool itself, yes, but then also just what you have to do in order to make that spreadsheet work, which is a lot of planning. You have to be more thoughtful about it. So I have to go and do a certain amount of research, and then I have to jot down. And that process in and of itself made me stop doing so much of a spray and pray kind of a thing, just apply to everything and take a more manicured approach. And that can be kind of worrisome, because you're thinking like, oh, well, all these opportunities present themselves. How am I going to apply to all of them? And then you take a step back and it's like, well, no, I'm only targeting these 10 companies, and I'm going to really hone in on these 10. And it's just your level of detail goes up. So that's the thing that I think I honed in on the most. A lot of the whole thing really flows together well, and it's very, very storybook driven. Just do this step and then this step and then this step. I like that as well. But yeah, just everything around that spreadsheet, which makes you just slow down and focus and be detail oriented. That was my main thing.
Yeah, it's awesome. I know, like in my case as well, I had a previous career before breaking in. Obviously, that was an awesome story about your background, everything that you've had to deal with. I'm curious, with you going into an SDR role and trying to package all of that information and make it relevant to being an SDR, breaking into a tech company, I'd love to have you share with the audience of how, what are things that you were able to take from business ownership, running gyms, all the things that you mentioned, and say, hey, I want to transition into tech sales and present that very effectively in an interview. Curious what comes to mind.
You mean in an interview capacity?
Yeah. And or resume, or just things that you found that really helped you package all of that and make it relevant for an SDR role.
The first thing I had to do was realize that corporate recruiters don't necessarily understand everything that goes into conceptualizing, opening, and running a brick and mortar business. The majority of them have never done it. So for me to say, oh yeah, I ran 3 fitness studios, they're like, yeah, okay, but have you prospected before? So there's a disconnect there. So from my perspective, I have to put this on my resume, but then I have to word it in a way that makes sense to them. So just from a communication standpoint, what words resonate with you? And so then when I get into the resume, into the interview, I can really hone in on, well, marketing brings a certain amount of people in through the door, but then we have a separate ICP that is strictly for personal training. And those people come from JP Morgan, Citibank, Forbes, which are right across the street from us. And we target specific individuals. When I first ran my first personal training studio, I had to buy a mailing list from a list broker. But this list broker, he was pretty much like a human Zoom info, if you will. And he's like, okay, let's find people within a mile of your studio and they make this amount of money and, all these demographics and psychographics. And so I had to do that process. So that's all prospecting. And then you get all these people in the door, and then you realize I don't like working with half of these people. So half of these people aren't the right fit for my studio. So then you have to go back and you have to prune your list and, you know, really revise things. And then over time, you start to realize, oh, this type of person works. Eric, he's really thrived here. Let me find another carbon copy of him. Oh, that turns out to be Chris. And then Chris, let me find a female carbon copy of him. And then you just go on this journey of refining your list and your ICP. And so everything that I did, I had to talk about it in those terms. So I had to figure out, which was very helpful from your course, the language that is used in that industry, and just match it up to the things that I did, because I've done them all. And so the wording on the resume, had to change that up a bit. Your resume sessions were very, very helpful with that. And then, like I said, once you get in the door, I can then explain things the same way I just did with you. It's just learning the language that is used and then just matching up what I did with that specific language.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, what a great example. I feel like so many people would overcomplicate that, or I mean, we've worked, not naming names, with people who make it way more complicated than it needs to be. But that analogy, the way you broke that down, is like gold. I love that. And I'm curious, like, if there's any other advice for people out there that are maybe considering higher levels, or even just getting into their first round of interviews, trying to figure this out on their own. Any other interview advice or things, you know, that you would recommend coming from a different industry altogether than now breaking into tech?
I would say don't look at the immediate position. If you really are into the technology world, the software world, and you want to become a seller, I would say approach it as if you're already a strategic account executive. Approach it that way. Set up that end goal of, yeah, I want to be here. So approach everything that way. Look at the SDR position as it's a learning position. I know some people coming from other industries, they're going to take the income hit, but that's not what it's there for. It's a learning position. You're there to learn. And if you really just submit yourself to the position and, you know, I'm going to take lumps, I may get hung up on, this may happen, I may get a bloody nose, just accept it. It's a part of the process. It's that journey. And then you move out of that quickly. But if you focus on, okay, SDR, and, you know, I'll be doing this for, oh God, it's wrong attitude. Attack it full force, sign up for a course. And, you know, I think Tech Sales Ascension is the best course. So definitely sign up for that. But then just follow everything that they tell you to do and give yourself to the position. It's a starting position. It's like people that complain about minimum wage. It's a starting point. It's not meant to be the end point. That's it. You start there and then you progress from there. So that's what I would say.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people really need to take to heart, because I mean, I kind of have to go through the same thing. But to my point earlier, I think that there's so many people that fall off when they have to make that decision. There's a lot of ego that gets in the way, and they don't even want to take like a 15K pay bump, or, you know, what do you call it, pay reversal or whatever, just to be in that for. And it's only 12 to 18 months as well. After that, you literally double your earnings, and you're probably back, if not like making more than you were before that. So I think that there's a lot of good stuff to this story. It's unfortunate that a lot of the folks that are in your situation just end up giving up because they just don't want to make that decision. But every single person that we've had that actually is mature enough to make that call, they always end up in a better spot. And, you know, like, you're very well spoken. You're obviously like a killer. I think that you're going to have no problem progressing up very, very fast. But Michael, we appreciate the time. This was solid. We're going to drop your LinkedIn down below. I know that you're about to go into ramping over at ZoomInfo. So
yes, thank you.
If you're not like too busy, don't blow Michael up. But, you know, if you do have some time, definitely hit him up, because I think there's a lot of golden nuggets and very, very unique situation. I love the way that you spoke about it, the way that you repackaged everything. But this was killer. Eric, I don't know if you have any famous last words, but.
No, I appreciate the time. I'm really excited for you, and yeah, excited to see where you're at 6, 12, 24 months from now. So
thank you. I will keep you posted along the entire way.